Hello everyone, this is Reza Dorrani. Today's video is all about Microsoft Forms and Power Automate. We will create surveys and quizzes in Microsoft Forms and then leverage Power Automate to get all the responses from the Microsoft form, filter those responses, run calculations on those responses, save that Excel file of responses or run reports on it, generate a PDF document based on results from the quiz, and a lot more. So let's check this out in action. Microsoft Forms is a simple, lightweight tool that allows us to quickly create surveys and quizzes. These forms could be anonymous forms, or these could be forms that are secured only for users within your organization. And there are two types of forms we can create. One is a standard Microsoft form, and another is a quiz-based form option that allows us to create a quiz, add points to each question, and evaluate the responses. Let's try and create a very simple form for collecting feedback around an event. So I'll click on New Form, give the form a name. Let's add questions for the form. There are some predefined set of questions that artificial intelligence recommends. I'll pick your name, your email, and just add them to the form. I'll add a rating question here, and I'll add one more question here of type Net Promoter Score. How likely are you to recommend this event to a friend or colleague? Goes from 0 to 10, and that completes my form. I can add themes to my form, and I can click Preview to look at my form in action. The respondents can fill this out on any browser without having to install any app. If I head over to the settings of this form, currently it is set to only people in my organization to respond, and their names would be recorded once they provide a response. I can even make this form anonymous. Now if I head over to share, I can just grab this form link. If I was to fire that URL, that form opens up for me. I can just put in my name, email, give a rating for the event, fill out the remaining portion of my survey, and click submit, and my response was submitted. As the owner of the form, if I go to responses, I can see that response has come in, and I have the option here to open this. We have the start time, completion time, the email and name attributes. Because I set it up as an anonymous survey, it won't capture that information. These are the details that are getting captured from the question that I asked in the form. Now, as more and more responses come in, they will all be logged within Microsoft Forms. And in the responses tab, we can see the average time that the user takes to complete the form. We can see the total responses, and we can see the results per question as well. There is an option called View Results, which will break down the responses by every respondent. Now, if you would like to create an automation process around the responses that we are receiving through Microsoft Forms, we have Power Automate. We will go to New Flow and create an automated cloud flow, a flow that triggers automatically whenever a new response is submitted for Microsoft Forms. We'll give this flow a name. We'll click Create. The trigger requires the form ID. I will pick my form from the list. We need the details of the response. So for that, for Microsoft Forms, we have the Get Response Details action. Once again, we pick the form, and then we provide the response ID. To see the properties that are exposed from the Get Response Details action, for now, I will just add a Compose action. And here we have all our questions: the name, email, the overall rating for the event, how likely they are to recommend. We also get the responder's email and the submission time. There are many scenarios wherein we would need to get all the responses of the form. For example, I need a report of how many responses have I received for my survey, or how many have responded with an overall event rating that is less than 3. With this flow, we will only get an individual response. So here I would like to highlight a very good blog post by one of the Microsoft Business Application MVPs, Hiro. And in his blog, he has showcased an API that allows us to directly query Microsoft Forms. Forms could be user-owned, or it could be related to a specific group. In my case, it's a user-owned form. And in order to query this API, we can directly leverage the SharePoint send an HTTP request action to query forms.office.com and specifically that endpoint to get the details of that specific form. So let's go ahead and try this out. For the trigger point for my flow, I will select the manual trigger. I will select the send an HTTP request to SharePoint action. And right here under site address, we will go to enter custom value. We will get this error that says we are unable to find the site address. Just click on the title of this action so it closes it and then reopen it. We will be using the get method, and then the endpoint for the user owned form, just going to copy it and I will paste that right here. For the token tenant ID, we need to provide the ID of our tenant. I am directly grabbing that from Azure. I will paste that right here. For the user ID token, I am the owner of the form, so I need my token here. I will add an action. I will use the get my profile action from the Office 365 users connector. And one of the properties that this connector exposes is called ID. Just going to pick that dynamic content right here. This is where I need to plug in the ID of my form. If I go back to my form, in the URL itself, I have an attribute that says form ID. I'm going to copy it, go back to my flow, and just paste it right here. Now, if we were to save this flow, and let's go ahead and test this flow. Once the flow run completes, if we look at the output of the send an HTTP request action for show raw outputs, I'm going to copy this output and I will paste this in Visual Studio Code. The output is of type JSON. Now, if you look at the body of the response, we get a lot of details about the Microsoft form that we created. The created by users information, the status of the form, the ID of the form, the name of the form, when was it created, when was it last modified, and many other important pieces of information. One key property here is called row count. This gives us the total number of responses that the form has currently received. However, what we want is all the responses. If I was to right click and go to inspect and run a network trace on this, when I click open in Excel, it downloads that Excel file. But here, there is an API endpoint that gets called. And that endpoint looks like this. And this is a GET request against this endpoint to grab all the responses of the form in an Excel file, which is exactly what we need. Go ahead and copy this, go back to Flow. We will use the send an HTTP request to SharePoint action. This one I will rename to get form responses. For the site address, go to enter custom value, put in forms.office.com, close the action, open the action, it's a get request, paste that URL right here. We're going to begin from /form API, download the Excel file. Here is the form ID, and there are other attributes right here as well. One of the key attributes here is the max response ID. Previous action that we queried did give us the row count. So all we need is to replace that hard-coded max response ID with this row count attribute. Our action send an HTTP request to SharePoint, I will rename this to form info. And for get form responses for the max response ID, our expression would be body of form info. This is case sensitive, so it has to match the exact name, question mark, row count. I'll click OK. This action will return blob for that Excel file. We want to read the data from that Excel file. And in order to do that, we have to first store this Excel file. It could be OneDrive, SharePoint, or any other data source of your choice. I will create this Excel file in my OneDrive. I can pick the folder path, could directly put it in the root. We need to give the file a name. Now, since I want the file name to be unique every time this flow runs, I will use an expression here called UTC now, which will give me the current date and time. And very important to provide the extension of the file, which is XLSX. I need the file content. This would be the body property that we receive from getForm responses. So the flow is triggered, gets my user profile, goes and grabs the form information, then goes and fires the query to download that Excel file. If we look at this endpoint, the max response ID is 4, which is the total number of responses. It gets the content of the file, and then it goes and creates that file in my OneDrive. Now in my OneDrive, I see that file right here. If I was to click on this file, it will be that same Excel file with all the responses of the form. And all of this data is inside a table called table 1. I would like to read the contents of the file. So let's take one use case. I would like to know how many users have provided a rating of 3 or less than 3. So I can notify my marketing team. Back to Flow and add a new step. There is an action called List Rows Present in a Table Excel Online Business Connector. This allows me to connect to either OneDrive or SharePoint to read data from an Excel file as long as it has a table. The location would be OneDrive for Business. The document library would be OneDrive. For the file, I will pick the ID property from the create file action. And for the table name, I will go to enter custom value and enter that name as is, which is table 1. Let's go ahead and test this flow. The flow has run successfully. List rows present in a table has provided the data from that file. Once again, let's go to show raw outputs, put it in Visual Studio Code, and let's analyze the response. In the body attribute, there is a property called value, which is of type array. This is an array of all the responses. I need to know how many individuals have provided a rating of 3 or less. I will add a new step. I will use the filter array data operation. Where is my array coming from? That would be the value property from list rows present in a table. And in this, head over to expression, item of the property I'm trying to read. That property name is right here. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it right here. If we observe this property, the data that Microsoft Form returns is always in the form of string. Now, if I'm going to compare this to a number in Flow, I'm going to add the int function so I can typecast this to an integer. I will click OK. Is less than or equal to 3. Now that I have this array, if I need to know how many responses to my survey have provided the rating of 3 or less, send an email notification to my marketing team. In this case, I'm going to pick myself. Feedback survey score low report. To get the total number, I'll use an expression called length, and length expects an array. I can switch over to dynamic content and just pick the body attribute from filter array. After filter array, I'll add a select action, pick the body property from filter array, select specific data points. So let's say I want the name and the email address of that individual. What was the score they provided? Copy the attribute name, call this name, and in the value, my expression would be item of my exact property name. Next one would be the email. And finally, I will pick the rating. Once I have this array, I need to send it in the email body. So I'm going to use another data operation action called create HTML table. This just requires an array. I will provide it the output of the select action. So this will create an HTML table for me that I can directly plug in straight into my send an email action right here. I can even go to show advanced options here and send the entire Excel file as an attachment to the email. For the attachment name, from my create file action, I'll just pick the name. And for the attachment content, we will pick it directly from the body of getForm responses. So once the flow run completes, if I head over to my email, here's the email of the feedback survey for the low scores. There's only one user who has provided that score. Here is the name that the user had entered and the email address, and the rating that that user had provided was 2. I also have the attached file, which should give me all the data of all the responses. Now there's a lot more that we can do with this. We can add multiple conditions here by writing expressions. We can select any of the fields we need. Once we create the HTML table, we can additionally go ahead and style it as well. For the trigger, we can also add inputs. I pick the text input, call this report type. Here I will go to add a drop-down list of options, high rating, low rating, so I can select the type of report I need from this flow. Right before my filter condition, I will add a condition, and the condition would check the report type. So if this is equal to low rating, then I will use the existing filter array action. Just copy this, paste it right here, and in this case, show me all the ratings that are greater than 3. Right before condition, I will initialize a variable of type array, and after these filter actions, I will go ahead and set that variable to the body of my filter array action. And I will do the same thing on the right hand side of the branch as well. And in my select action, I will directly leverage that variable. And the send an email action, wherein I've hard-coded low report, I'm going to copy this, paste it right here. That gives me the report type. I'll do the same thing in the body. And here in the responses, wherein we were relating to filter array, now we will pick it from our variable. Run this flow. It will ask for the type of report I need. I'll pick high rating and run the flow. When the flow reaches the point of the condition, it checks to see the type of filter I need to apply. In my case, it was high, so it goes and applies the filter. And this is what the email looks like. Total responses that provided high rating was 3, and this is all the details. You can also create a quiz experience leveraging Microsoft Forms. Here I have a simple quiz which has 5 questions. I can grant points per question and specify the correct answer or answers. This quiz is only available for my organization. I can go ahead and take this quiz. Once I've completed this, I can click submit and I can view the results of the quiz. Now for this quiz, I have 3 responses. So as the owner of the quiz, I can go to post scores. I can review each of the responses that I received and I can see the results. I can even select the user's name, go through each and every question and go ahead and provide feedback for all of the questions if required, or I can provide a general feedback to the user who's taken the quiz. Once I've completed my review, I can post the score. So the review for this user is completed. Let's take a use case. My quiz is of a total of 5 points. All my students who have got 4 points or more, basically those who have gained 80% or more, I would like to send them a certificate that they've successfully completed the quiz. Plus, I need a report of all the results. So I have a flow that does exactly that. First, let's go ahead and run the flow. The flow has successfully completed. I've sent an admin report of all the students who have scored 80% or more. Here are the results of the quiz. I'm showcasing how long they've taken to complete the quiz, their percentage, their name, email addresses, and the points they've earned, and the total points of the quiz. And for each of those students, I've gone ahead and sent a PDF certificate. Here is the certificate for Reza. And if Reza was to click on this PDF document, here is a certificate. Reza has completed that quiz with a percentage of 100. I've gone ahead and fired that query showcased by Hiro to grab information of the form. Now, just like before, the key property I was looking out for was row count. But in case of a quiz, we also need the total points as specified in the block here. It is important for us to expand the questions array. And once we do that, if we look at the output of the action, the questions array will provide each and every question that we have as part of our quiz and give us all the details of those questions. And there is a property called question info. And here is where the point associated with that question is specified. So if I need the total points of my quiz, I will have to go and grab this information, which is in an array of questions. My property is question info. This is in the form of a string. I would have to convert it to JSON and then grab the point value. After forms info, I have this select data operation wherein I'm pointing to that questions array, and in there I am converting that questions info string to a JSON object. I've initialized a variable called quiz total and set it to 0, integer. I loop through all my question info data, and for each of that information, I go and grab the point value and I keep adding that or incrementing that into this quiz total variable. I need that Excel file. I need all the responses. I call that API to get the responses. I create my Excel file in OneDrive. I go and grab all the data from that table called table 1. I write my select action, and here I'm writing some formulas. For every response, we have the start time and the completion time. So all I've done here is written an expression, the difference between the start time and the completion time of the quiz. Next, I needed the percentage. So the points that the user has earned, which we receive as a property called total points, divided by my variable, which is quiz total. Grab the email, the name, the total points, and put the quiz total, all of this in this array. Then I filter this to only give me the data where the user has scored 80% or more. Here I'm querying percentage that I created right here in the select action. I create my HTML table, send it as an email, and then I loop through all the filtered results because those are my students who've scored 80% or more. I create a simple HTML to represent that certificate style. Then I create this HTML file in OneDrive. I use the convert file action to convert it to a PDF and then send it out to that specific student who's taken the quiz. And here is the content of that attached file, which is that PDF file. All of these actions are leveraging standard connectors, no premium connector required. So let me know if you enjoyed this video. If you did, then do like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you so much for watching.